Hello, thank you for joining me. So this is our first video in our series pretty much throughout the quarter on how to model in SolidWorks. And this is a short little video series that we're going to be doing right now is how to get started in SolidWorks. Now we're going to be using two books in class throughout the quarter. One of those is Engineering Design with SolidWorks by David C. Blanchard and Marie P. Blanchard. And the other book is produced by SolidWorks. It's called Student's Guide to Learning SolidWorks Software. And doesn't really have an author to this, but this is available from the SolidWorks website, and I do have a link to the PDF document on our website, so make sure you get both of those books in hand before we get to this point in our video series, because there's the assumption here that you've gone through a portion of book number 1 or lesson number 1 in the Blanchard book, and you're ready to get started with this, because the assumption here is you've already created your millimeter template file. What we like to do is make a modification to that template file and then resave that as our inches file, our template file, so we have two of those. We have an inches template file and a millimeter template file before we get started with our first part. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and open that up. If you don't have that open yet, I think I already have mine opened, but for the sake of demonstration I'm going to go ahead and close that out. And the way you open up a file in SolidWorks, I'll close my 3D view. I have a 3D mouse that has a display that comes up occasionally, but you probably won't have that on your computers in the CAD lab. So go to File, go to Open, and let's go to our folder where that might be contained in. So I have a folder called Class. Within the Class folder I have templates and a Week 1 folder. Week 1 folder was created. Right now it's blank, there's nothing inside of that, but whatever parts I'm going to be creating today in these videos, in this video series, I'm going to go ahead and put in my Week 1 folder. So what I have is a class folder here. Within that class folder I'm going to have a number of different folders, and by the time we get to the end of our class, we're going to have many folders in here. And what I like to do is have these folders created and maintained with those specific week's lessons in them. So I've already created week number 1. Next week will be week number 2, and so on and so forth. The desire here is to have folders for specific weeks, as I mentioned. But you want to make sure that whatever files you put in those folders, like in week number 1 or week number 2, that you maintain those after you get through that week. So all the files we're going to be creating in week number 1, if we need to use those in week number 2 or week number 3, which is likely, we're going to copy those files out of those folders and put them in the subsequent week's folders. I hope that made sense. But what you want to do is maintain a record of what you've done in the past, just in case you need to go back to that original file before you made modifications to it. Okay, kind of belabored that a little bit. Let's go ahead and open up our template file, our part millimeter ANSI.SLD.PRT, which is SolidWorks file extension for their parts files. And let's make some changes to it. This is our menu bar up top. Right to the right of the menu bar, you will find almost all the way over to the right in the second section over here is going to be the options button. Within those options button, as it's described in the book, we're going to go to document properties. We're going to change a couple of different things. This probably says ANSI right now instead of ANSI modified. I made modifications to it just prior to doing this video, so it does say ANSI modified, but one thing you got to keep in mind that you'll learn is whenever you make changes to your ANSI file, which is a drafting standard here, if you make changes to that, it's going to call it ANSI modified or ISO modified if you go beyond the changes that are dictated by the standards that are set. So let's do this. If you don't have it chosen as ANSI as opposed to ISO, ANSI being American National Standards Institute, that's a test question by the way, and then ISO, which is International Standards Organization, another test question. Make sure you know what those are for the test. But we want to choose the ANSI over ISO right now. So we're going to choose that. That's our drafting standard up here. Then we're going to scroll down to units. Millimeter gram second is what we should choose. Our dual dimension length is going to be in inches rather than millimeters. And you might have millimeters in here. So let me show you. Let's just let me regress a little bit here and show you how to make these changes. So, because I made a change here, it's suggesting it's the drafting standard is going to be called ANSI modified. ANSI modified 1 now, because I already had ANSI modified. So, let's change that back. This is what you want to do. You want to make sure your dual dimension length is going to be in inches rather than millimeters, so scroll down and choose inches. And then choose a precision of 3 units after the decimal as opposed to 2 units after the decimal for the millimeter. Because the millimeter units are so much smaller than inches, we don't need quite as much precision. So this would be appropriate to have probably millimeters down to maybe 1/10 of a millimeter rather than 100th, but we'll leave it as it is. So for millimeters, we're going to keep this as a basic standard here for us within this class. 2 units after the decimal, inches 3 units after the decimal. All done with that, go to OK. And then let's go ahead and save it. And let's go ahead and save as, and guess what, we're going to call this inches. Now that we have millimeters created, we're going to call this one inches. We're going to use the same standards we had set up before and call this inches. And yeah, and go to save. Now we have to go back to our options button, and now we're going to make some changes. Drafting standards are going to be ANSI modified 1, I guess. Units, this time instead of millimeter gram second, we're going to pick the radio button for IPS, inch pound second. That's another test question, by the way. IPS as opposed to MMGS. Length, now in inches, we're going to have a precision of 3 units after the decimal. Dual dimension length, or secondary measurement units here is going to be millimeters, and we're going to change that precision down to 2 units after the decimal. And go to OK. Now we're ready to get started. So what we want to do, we're going to save this for the next film. We're just going to go ahead and resave this. We're going to do our new part in inches. We're going to resave this as a new file, and we're going to put that in our week 1 folder. Talk to you soon.